the wine steward and the baker. Genesis 40. Sometime later, both the Pharaoh's wine steward and his chef baker angered the Pharaoh and were thrown into prison. One night, both men had strange dreams and were puzzled. Joseph said to them, "My God will be able to help. Tell me your dreams." The wine steward went first. In my dream, I saw a vine with 3 branches covered in grapes. I took the grapes and squeezed them into the Pharaoh's cup. Joseph told him within 3 days Pharaoh would pardon him to take him back, and he asked the steward to remember him. Now the baker was anxious to tell his dream too. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. He said, okay. Now the baker was anxious to tell his dream too. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. He said, but birds were eating Pharaoh's pastries. Joseph was sad. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will cut off your head, and the birds will eat your flesh. Things turned out just as Joseph had foretold. In three days, the Pharaoh's birthday, and on that day, he pardoned the cupbearer and gave him his job back his job. But he hanged the chef baker. Oh boy. Yeah, that's kind of morbid. I wasn't expecting it like that. But I guess that's what happens when you're dealing with Joseph when he did with the wine wine steward first. With that one, within 3 days to get his job back, while the other, that is a chef baker, that he's no longer alive and no longer in Pharaoh's thing anymore. Dang, that's oof. Kind of feel sorry for that guy. At least he's in a better place now. Pharaoh's dreams. Genesis 41. Joseph asked the wine steward to remember him when he got out of prison. But 2 years passed before the Hebrew slave crossed his mind. It happened like this. One night Pharaoh had a strange dream. He was standing by the river by the Nile when out of the river came 7 cows, healthy and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows ugly and thin, came up out of the Nile, stood beside them, and then the thin cows ate up the fat cows, and yet looked just as thin and sickly as before. Pharaoh had another dream. 7 healthy heads of grain were growing on a single stalk. Then 7 more heads of grain sprouted, and these were thin and scorched by the wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. In the morning, Pharaoh felt worried. He sent for all of his magicians and wise men of Egypt, but no one could interpret the dreams. So that kind of became a problem for the Pharaoh and those people that he summoned out, his magicians and wise men of Egypt to help him, and they just couldn't figure that out. So they couldn't figure that out. So the only one that can do that was only Joseph, with God with him. What can it mean? What can it mean? Genesis 41. It was then that the wine steward remembered Joseph, and the slave was brought before the mighty Pharaoh, who asked him to explain his dream. I cannot do it, Joseph replied to the Pharaoh, but God will be able to explain. Once Pharaoh had told his dream, Joseph replied, "These two dreams are really one and the same. The 7 cows and the 7 heads of grain are 7 years. The land will be blessed with 7 years of healthy crops and bountiful harvest, but they will be followed by 7 years of dreadful famine. You will need to plan carefully to prepare for what lies ahead." Pharaoh spoke to his advisors and then turned to Joseph, saying, "It is clear to me that you are the man we need. Since God has made all this known to you, I will put you in charge of my land. You'll be second only to me in all of Egypt." And with that, the Pharaoh put his own signet ring on Joseph's finger, a gold chain around his neck, and dressed him in fine linen. And that's what he did, right before they got Joseph out of jail. The steward told the Pharaoh, told him to remember him. And that happened. And that was going on with him. Right. A wise leader. Genesis 41. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, riding in a fine chariot. He traveled throughout the land, making sure the food was put aside for the times of hardship ahead of them, just as he had foretold. The country was blessed with 7 years of bumper crops, and so much grain was stored in the cities that he gave up counting it. After 7 years of famine began, when people of Egypt began to run out of food, Pharaoh told them to go to Joseph. Now Joseph opened up the storehouses and sold the grain that have been put away so carefully no one in Egypt went hungry. In fact, there was so much food in Egypt that people from other countries traveled there to buy food, for the famine was severe throughout the world. Yep, that's the 7 years, right? Because the 7 years before was supposed to be it's supposed to be good and bountiful. But the next 7 years is going to be a famine. So that was going on here. Because of that was going on due to that dream that the Pharaoh told Joseph with God with him. That was going on. Which is very true. And I know this, we know this book does not lie. Because without the Bible, then we all be in serious trouble right now. And not in a very good way. It will be controversial and a lot of consequences. Lots of it, if you're not careful. The brothers buy grain. Genesis 42:43. In Canaan, the famine hit Joseph's family hard too. Jacob decided to send his sons to buy grain in Egypt. Only Benjamin stayed behind, for Jacob could not bear to lose his youngest son. When they reached Egypt, the brothers bowed down to Joseph with his golden chain and fine clothes. They did not recognize him, but Joseph could see his dream becoming reality as they bowed their heads low and begged to buy food. Right, and that was the dream before all this even happened. That was back there when he had that dream when his brothers were so jealous of him. And now look at they are now. Now they see what happened with their actions. Joseph wanted to see if his brothers have changed at all, so he planned to test their honesty and loyalty. He accused them of being spies, and when they protested their innocence, he agreed to let them go back to Canaan with grain, on the condition that they return with their youngest brother. Jacob did not want to let Benjamin go, but in the end he had to agree. So his brothers returned with more money to pay for the grain, for when they had opened the sacks, they have been horrified to find that the money had been taken with them to Egypt. The first time to pay for the grain was still in them. The long lost brother. Genesis 42:45. Sorry. Joseph was so overcome when he saw Benjamin that he had to hide his face. He had his servants feed the brothers, then sent him on their way with more food, but not before hiding a silver cup in Benjamin's sack. The brothers were traveling home when guards came upon them and dragged them back to the palace. "Thieves," shouted Joseph, "I treated you with kindness, and you repay me by stealing." "There must be some mistake," cried the brothers, but when the guards checked, there was a silver cup in Benjamin's sack. The brothers fell to their knees. "My lord," they cried, "take any of us, but do not take Benjamin, for his brother's heart would break." Yeah, now you know the consequences. Now you know the consequences when you should have did that to your brother in the first place. And you regret that. At least they learned their lesson for that. At this, Joseph knew that his brothers' hearts were no longer hard, and so he hugged them. Amid much weeping and amazement, he told them that he was their long-lost brother, and that they should not feel too guilty for it, have all been part of the Lord's plan. That was true. That's literally what God planned to do. "I was sent to rule in Egypt so that you would not starve in Canaan," he told them, and then sent for his father. Moving to Egypt. Genesis 46. Jacob gathered up all his belongings, his herd, flocks, and his family had traveled to Egypt. God spoke to him, telling him not to be scared of going to Egypt, for he would lead them out of Egypt once again when the time was right. By now, the members of Jacob's family were 70 in all. Joseph came to meet his brother in a great chariot, and led him back to Egypt, where he and his family were well treated and given land in Goshen to tend their animals. In the meantime, the famine raged and Joseph was kept busy, but there was still enough food for everyone. Although they had to pay Pharaoh, and he became very rich indeed. When the famine was over, they planted seed that Joseph had wisely set aside. The death of Jacob, Genesis 48:50. Now Jacob was growing old. Before he died, he called all of his sons together and gave them each a special blessing. They were to form 12 tribes of Israel, and he named Joseph a prince among his brothers. He made Joseph promise to bury him in Canaan, in the spot where he had buried his wife Leah, and where Isaac and Rebekah were buried before her, and Abraham and Sarah before them. When Jacob had breathed his last breath, with Pharaoh's permission, all Jacob's family, except the children, and those who tend the animals, set off for Canaan, where they buried their father Jacob, also known as Israel. Rest in peace, Jacob. At least you're in a better place that you cannot be hurt no more. Well, this is Elemental Jones signing out. Thank you all for listening to me read the Bible today. If you have any questions about it, I think you can read it for yourself. The book is called The Complete Illustrated Children's Bible. It's a pretty good one that I know I have to read on my own sometimes. But the truth must come out. So yeah, they need to know about our Almighty Savior. Kids, it's important to learn about our the Almighty God, because without Him, you all be in serious trouble right now. So if I were you, I would take that in consideration. We are dealing with the Almighty, because that is nothing to be played around with. God is nothing to be played around with. So anyways, see you all next time. Bye-bye for now.